Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Wall Street from A to Z podcast. And today's special guest is a new guest. His name is Jeff Brown. He's the editor of 44days.net. Now, Jeff lived in China, so we're going to get some interesting insight from him on what's going on in China. So, Jeff, thank you for joining me.
Good evening for me and good afternoon for you. We're on the opposite sides of the globe.
Yes, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and on your side.
Yeah, and you just had lunch.
Well, that's the great thing about it. I could talk to anybody from around the world. I mean, 10 years ago, I couldn't do that
Yeah, I
online.
know. It's amazing. It really is. And it's costing what with Skype, like 2.5 or 3.5 cents a minute. It's just unreal. No, actually, we're Skype to Skype. It's free.
Yeah, it's free. So
Yeah,
we're
it's
talking
free.
for free.
That's
It's
right.
great. So, Jeff, I want to start off by talking about what's going on in the China economy. Now, recently, today, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the Chinese stock market. Overnight, the Shanghai Composite collapsed, went down almost 8% overnight, while the other Chinese stock exchange crashed even more. And this is the single biggest drop in the Shanghai Composite in one day since 2007. So, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Is this a sign of things to come in the Chinese economy?
No, Mo, I don't really think so. I mean, to be honest with you, I trust China's stock market transparency about as much as I do the West's. I think it's just as manipulated by computer programming, electronic trading, large fund traders, hedge fund traders, government intervention. There's just as much speculation and rumor here as everywhere else. There's punters, promoters. So I have absolutely zero faith in the fact that it's not a free market any more than than Wall Street is not, and so that's one thing. And look at what happened. It went from 3,200 in January, their index, the Shanghai index. It went from 3,200 in January to 5,200 until just a few days ago. I mean, that's a 60% increase in less than 6 months. So, now it's back down to about 4,400. So, what did people expect? I mean, that this was going to just keep, sort of like, 1988 and do everything else. It was just going to go on forever and ever. I mean, it was just obviously, I'd say, kind of a hyped market.
Yeah, a lot of the banks here in the U.S. are predicting that the Chinese bubble is about to blow up, and this crash that we had just today, it gives them some standing ground on their research that maybe there's signs of things to come in the Chinese economy. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, Mo, you know what? All their research, there is so much bias. There is so much misinformation in the West, what I call, behind the Western firewall. The bias is the fact that China is not a U.S. puppet. It doesn't take orders like France and Germany and the UK and Australia and Japan and South Korea. It's not a vassal state, nor is Russia for that matter. And so they are demonized, and the fact that the Chinese government is communist makes it automatically unacceptable. What they do can't work because it's not America's phony free markets and phony free capitalism. And because it is communist, and because it is not a puppet, there's so much garbage in the Western press, and to sit there and talk about this is the sign of a bubble that's going to pop, then they need to be doing different research because it's just not true.
I mean, let's not fool ourselves. I mean, the U.S. economy is in a bubble as well. We have a bond bubble, we have a college bubble, we have a housing
Yeah,
bubble in
yeah.
certain part of the U.S. that's back up.
The housing bubble is caused by the Chinese buying up all the real estate on the east and west coast.
Yeah, exactly. And China, in the past couple of years, become the #1 real estate investor in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to shift gears here and talk about the real estate in China. There's a lot of speculation out there that the Chinese real estate is in a bubble, and there's a lot of stories out there about the ghost cities that China has, where they built all these skyscrapers and big, tall office buildings, and yet there's nobody in there. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Is that a problem or not in China? And do you think the real estate in China is in a bubble?
I would say that going back to the stock market, that was definitely, a bubble. It was like a 6-month bubble, not something that's been building up since 2008. And I would like to point out that now I don't know. I got these numbers off of the Shanghai exchange yesterday, and so I don't know if these numbers were before the big correction or not. But the current price, the current PE ratios for Shanghai for the A shares, which is kind of like the Dow, is 22.75, and for the B shares it's 28, which is a little high. The New York Stock Exchange Composite is 21.7, NASDAQ is 22.8, and the S&P is 21.7. So it could be actually that at 3,200, 6 months ago, it may have been undervalued. I'm assuming these PE ratios were probably the day before the big correction. But in any case, it's not like the PE ratios were 50 or 60. It was in the same ballpark as the U.S. stock market. So, but as you say, we know it's in a bubble. I remember back in the 80s and stuff, I thought people started to panic when there was a PE ratio of like greater than 15, and I think now people are just so inured to these high PE ratios they don't even think about them anymore.
And yeah, we have another contact in China that we bring on for a podcast. His name is Dan Collins, and he said that even though there's ghost cities in China, after a few years, they quickly get filled up. And there's people living there, and there's shopping centers and etc. So he doesn't think the ghost city is that big of a problem there.
I don't either. The Chinese have actually since 1949, since liberation, when the communists took over, the Chinese have built over 600 cities from the ground up. So they're really good at this, and I'm not talking about gated communities with a couple of hundred houses. I'm talking about cities with tens and hundreds of thousands of people. And the Chinese have obviously been able to do a lot of research, and they say that it takes about 20 years for one of these cities to fully develop. And what the Chinese want to avoid is they want to avoid places like Mexico City and Rio de Janeiro and Mumbai and India, where there is uncontrolled movement of people into big cities, to where the social and municipal services are overwhelmed, and you end up with slums and things like that. And these ghosts, these supposed ghost cities, what's happened is that the Western press finds one of these places that is somewhere along that 20-year evolution to complete development, and they go, see, look, this is a ghost city. But here's how it works. First off, there's the local governments in China only get 40% of the national tax receipts from the central government, which I call Baba Beijing. And but they're responsible for 80% of their budget. So the difference is being national programs to provide at the local level. So they've got to come up with 40% of their budget somehow. And the most popular way is to generate this local revenue is for a town or a city to buy up cheaper rural land and pay the farmers in cash or with apartments built in that town, that new town, and then reclass the land as urban and then sell it to a developer for a nice profit. And it's estimated that that local governments in China are pulling in about $500 billion a year this way, $500 billion. And the reason that it looks weird sometimes is because the developer cannot land speculate. There's a national law, the green land must be developed. You have to build. You cannot sit on it. So this is where the so-called ghost towns seem to come in. And depending on the market demand and depending on the prices, the developer may drag out the completion of the project, or they may build it in a matter of a few months if the market's right. And so that's why, in any case, Chinese research does show it takes about 20 years for these cities to develop. And so the mainstream press in the West, they paint these terrifying pictures of Twilight Zone, emptiness and market's gone mad. It's not true. The towns are just not there yet, and so you have they're lower, they're further back on the growth curve. And the anti Chinese communist poster child, Ordo City up in Inner Mongolia, it has 300,000 people. And there's Zhengdong, you may have heard of these, new district in Henan, that's for 5 million people, and Nanhui for 500,000. And there's a South China Mall in Guangdong. My family, we've even been to Tim's Town in Shanghai to act on a movie set down there in the Pujiang in Shanghai. They do a lot of film shoots in these empty towns, but in 10 years they will not be empty.
Do you ever go out and check out these other cities that've been built or ghost cities?
I don't have to, Mo. We live in one. My family, we moved into a ghost city here in Beijing for 2 years ago, and so we've actually lived through this evolutionary cycle. And people can if people go on my website 44days.net, there's a photograph of John Woo, the Hollywood director, holding an old-time camera. And if you click on that, that's my Flickr. That's my Flickr site, and you can see lots of pictures of our neighborhood. Now, those pictures are about a year to a year and a half old. I haven't taken new ones, I've taken them, but I haven't loaded them up yet. But anyway, ours is called Kangying Jiayuan. And when we got here 2 years ago, 80% of the apartments were empty. I mean, it was just absolutely deserted. And this is a big place. I mean, this is a suburb of Beijing for 30,000 people. And this was land that farmers, had owned, rural places in this area. And they did the same thing. They were offered these apartments. They sold it to a developer, and these towers, these urban towers, were built. And when we got here, manhole covers were sticking up 10 or 20 centimeters above the floor of the street level because it hadn't even been paved yet, and there were no traffic signals, and there were just a few cheap restaurants and a little convenient, a few convenience stores. And there was a bank, Bank of Beijing had a branch here, and a nearly empty kindergarten through 8th grade public school. And it's just been amazing to actually live through this ghost city development. Then comes a pharmacy, and then we had a hotel built, and then bigger shopping stores, dry cleaning, medical services. And then recently, we got a pool hall and, coffee shops and nice restaurants and hardware stores and travel agencies and on and on. And the place is just filling up. And early on, we had no buses. Our metro station is a kilometer and a half away, and now we have 9 bus lines coming in right down below our apartment. There's 3-wheeled taxis that take people to the metro station, and now all the roads are paved. We have stoplights, gardens, tree-lined streets, concerts on the weekends, parades, fireworks shows, basketball and soccer courts and ballroom dancing in the public park at night. And so we've lived it, and of course we are a suburb of Beijing, so our evolutionary development only took 2 or 3 years, although it's not finished yet. I mean, there's still big chunks of it that have not been opened up for lease yet. And so brand new cities, built in an outlying area would take more than 2 or 3 years, but we've actually seen it happen before our very eyes.
Oh, that's very interesting. And for the media to be, I think the U.S. media is kind of biased against what's going on in China and compared to what's going on in the U.S. economy. But if the U.S. media want to see a ghost city, they should go to Detroit. That's a ghost city.
Yeah, that's right. Or some of the other bombed out places like was it Trenton, New Jersey, and well, even in where I grew up in Oklahoma, when during the 80s, when George H.W. Bush, and his administration, foreclosed on tens of thousands of small farmers, back in the United States, and just rural towns just decimated, boarded up towns, just block after block with stoplights not working and gas stations closed, and one convenience store left open for the people living in the area, and shanty, trailer park homes, and it you're exactly right, Mo. It happened in America, and it probably still is, but these are such massive projects, with 300,000 to 5 million people, and so they're more apparent, and the fact that they are willing to let these things sit empty, for weeks or months, or even sometimes for several years. That's why it's easy to to take pot shots at them.
Yeah, a lot of U.S. cities here are pretty much bankrupt or getting close to being bankrupt. So Detroit is not the only city that's
there's many of them. Well, yeah, there's a bunch of them in California. I was reading articles about how they're so over leveraged and they got suckered into these Wall Street products, that kind of front loaded some money to them and to keep them from, going under. But, the payback at the end, it was like loan shark rates, and they've had to pass laws to, they can only take, I don't know what it was, like 15 times as much, or it was just ridiculous. But it's just like trying to, hold off the day when many cities in the United States are going to go belly up.
Yeah, so another topic I want to cover with you regarding China is robotics and the rise of robotics in the China manufacturing industry. Do you see the Chinese manufacturing using more robotics as wages could continue to increase and China start losing their low-cost advantage in terms of production? Because I'm looking at the stats and numbers for the wages, and between 2004 and 2013, the real wages for manufacturing increased at a compound annual growth rate at 14%.
Yes, it's I know it sounds counterintuitive, but China is making a huge push into robotics, and the reason is, why? Well, 20 years ago, young people, saw a future in manufacturing. Assembly line jobs were very highly sought after. Now they have more opportunities. And as you said, labor costs are going up. And in Cambodia, for example, in RMB equivalent, a monthly assembly line job is 603 RMB a month. And in Vietnam, it's 911 RMB a month. And in China now, it's 3,483, almost 3,500 RMB a month. And Baba Beijing is actually encouraging this. They do not want to be a low wage slave economy. They have built the largest middle class in the last 30 years. Well over 300 million people. It's still the fastest growing middle class in the world. They're adding about 10,000 new people to the middle class every day. And so they actually do want to encourage this. And they also know that as wages go up, local consumption will go up, and they want to encourage local consumption and not be so dependent on an export economy. And another reason is because of the one-child policy, and this is also a problem, even in the West. The 16-year-old to 59-year-old labor pool is slowly shrinking, and about 400,000 people a year. It's going down. Of course, we're talking about out of a pool of 915 million people, but still, it's not growing. It's going down. And also, Baba Beijing sees robots as a way to produce higher value, higher tech products for the local market and for export. In other words, move away from furniture and shoes and toys and try to move, towards more expensive products for export to compete against Europe and the United States. And so this year or next, it's going to happen somewhere as we speak. China is poised to have more robots in service than any other country, surpassing the United States and Germany. And by 2017, China is projected to have about 450,000 robots online. It's pretty stagnant in the U.S. and Germany right now with the stagnating economies, and they have less than 300,000 each. So there's also just a lot of upside potential. China only has about 30 robots per 10,000 workers. Germany and Japan have over 10 times that concentration. They've got over 300 robots per 10,000 workers. And so China is buying a lot of robots from the big four manufacturers. They're buying about 25% of the world robot production, and they're also starting to build robot factories here and competing against, ABB in Switzerland and Japan's Fanuc and Yaskawa and Germany's Cuda. And so there's now 30 robot manufacturing companies here, and they're going to do to robots what they did to solar and wind and other industries. Are going to cause them to slash their prices. An ABB robot that was very popular here in China that they were selling for 500,000 RMB, they had to slash to 200,000 RMB to compete against a Chinese robot maker. And so what's going to end up happening is like solar and like wind and a number of other industries, telephones and everything else, mobile phones and computers, the manufacturers of robots will end up, moving their manufacturing of robots over here for export, just like automobiles and everything else. So China will do to robots, what it has done to, solar, wind, and mobile phones and computers. They'll do the same thing over the next 10 to 20 years.
And so from what I'm hearing from you and other sources, it sounds like the Chinese economy is starting to become more modernized. They're moving away from having slave like condition for workers and starting to increase wages. They're starting to integrate robotics in their manufacturing, and we're also seeing an increase in discretionary spending by the Chinese. So we're
absolutely.
We're starting to see more cars on the road in China, and also people buying cell phones and etc.
Yeah, well, when we lived here in the 90s, we lived here from 1990 to 1997, and if you read my first book, 44 Days, that we called those the the Wild East, Buckaroo, Deng Xiaoping days. That was crazy, and you just had to be here to believe it. And back then, foreigners had everything that the Chinese wanted, and so they were very, very, they had, green eyes and were very envious of the fact that, we'd have a camera or we'd have a car or, we'd have, this gadget or that gadget or whatever. And then when we came back in 2010, the shoe is on the other foot. It's the Chinese now that have better cameras, better phones, better cars, nicer clothes. I mean, there's so much money sloshing in this economy. It's just the people are so incredibly well off, and so now we joke that they have what we want or what we used to want. So it's amazing what's happened in the last 20 years.
Yeah, yes, indeed. It's good to see that the Chinese are reaping the benefit from free market capitalism in terms of the economy. I know there's still problems with their social and political structure in China, but economically they're still prospering.
Well, to be honest with you, Mo, and I'm going to have to disagree with you. This social structure is doing fine. I mean, look, they've built 600 cities. They've built 16,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. They're connecting the country. They're running electrical connections. They're going to build. They're going to have 100 gigawatts of solar by the year 2020. And they are rolling out Social Security for everybody. We now pay taxes on our insurance, on our income every month. Foreigners and locals are required to pay Social Security. That's one of the reasons their salaries have gone up. A big chunk of that is Social Security for retirement and for universal health care. So here we have a country with 1.3 billion people who are rolling out a nationwide, Social Security and universal health care system, and the United States doesn't have universal health care. And then, the other thing that I just laugh, when I read like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and everything else about the brittle or shaky, political situation over here. They've been in power since 1949. I mean, and they're going to be in power for probably until I die, at least until I die. They're very responsive to the people's needs. Right now, the democracy over here is much more participatory, and the citizens are getting much more results than the United States. Right now, the two big concerns for the Chinese are pollution and of the environment, and corruption, which you could call pollution of the system. And the largest polling, the largest user of public polls in China is the Communist Party. And from the village level to the national level to across industries, across neighborhoods, streets, they are constantly, non-stop, polling people, finding out what they like and what they don't like. And unlike the United States, they respond to those concerns. And there's about 300 to 500 public protests a day here, somewhere around 150,000 a year. And those are addressed. They actually go out and listen to what these people are protesting over and try to come up with an amicable solution. We don't want this factory here. It's polluting our place. We don't want this highway coming through here. It's going to screw everything up. This developer's a crook. We want our money back, And so, this idea that somehow, China is, a social basket case is not true, because they are, the people here, well, their life expectancy is the same as Eastern Europe. And, there's hospitals everywhere and clinics everywhere and, pharmacies everywhere. And then this idea that the Communist Party is somehow, not adaptable. Not adaptable. It's just propaganda. It's not true.
Okay. Well, when I said social problem, I meant like human right problems that's been reported there. So from what you're saying, that's not as big of a problem as being reported.
Well, Mo, what is your definition of human rights? You know, in the United States, they've gunned down 500 citizens in the last 6 months, the police. You know, I feel very safe here. Our daughter just graduated from high school last week, and she spent the last almost 5 years here. She came here when she was, like 13 years old, and she could take the metro, she could take the buses, she can come home at night at 11 o'clock. We don't have to worry about her being raped or kidnapped or beaten up or whatever. We don't things like robberies and stuff happen, but not nearly on the scale that they do in the United States. And so, to be quite honest, I mean the crime level here is extremely low compared to the United States, especially because because of all the guns. Everybody's armed to the teeth. But even compared to Western countries, China's crime rates are really low. And then as far as white collar crime, they go after these people. They will literally execute a CEO of a corporation who has killed whose practices or policies
Commit fraud.
Kill people. There was the famous Vioxx case in the United States where the company that was selling Vioxx knew they were causing heart attacks among the people that were taking Vioxx. They buried the research, and they estimated that over 50,000 people in the United States and Europe died premature deaths because they were taking Vioxx. And the company, I think it was Pfizer, I can't remember which one it was, fought it to keep it from being taken off the market. They fabricated research results. They hid other research results until it was so obvious that they finally, had to take Vioxx off the market. How many arrests and how many people were imprisoned? 0. Then, and that 50,000 isn't a conservative number. They think it could be as high as 100,000 Westerners died early deaths because of Vioxx. And the guys got their stock options and their huge salaries, and life goes on. Over here, they had a milk scandal about 4 years ago where one of the companies got caught putting melamine in the milk to boost their protein content, at the farm gate, so they could get more money for their milk, and they got caught. About 1,500 children about 20,000 children got sick, and several died. It wasn't hundreds, but I think about 10 or 15 children died, and then maybe about 20 or 30 or maybe 100 of them had permanent brain damage or physical damage. I think it was livers because it destroyed their livers and stuff. Well, those the list of the guys from that company who got caught, 2 or 3 of them got a bullet in the back of the head, and a whole bunch of them got long prison sentences, of 5 to 20 years. So personally, if I want to commit fraud and rip people off and kill people, I'd rather do it in Europe and the United States than here. They actually go after people here for that kind of stuff.
Jeff, is there any chance we can move Wall Street to China?
Well, the stock market, I think it's just as rigged. It's just as phony as and just as even back when it was first started back in the 90s when we were here back in the 90s, guys were running around saying buy this, buy that. It was just all speculation. There was a lot of a lot of corruption going on, and a lot of blatant manipulation. The government has cleaned up a lot of that, and probably most of it, the vast majority of it. But I think the Chinese stock market is at this kind of at the same level as the Wall Street market now. What I will say is I think that the data that the Chinese government is producing about things like growth rate, inflation, debt, et cetera, the cost of, consumer price index is much, unemployment is much more credible than in the United States. I mean, everybody knows the labor numbers are bogus, and the consumer price index is deflated, and the inflation is deflated, and so that everybody in the United States, if they do a little bit of research, knows that most of those numbers are as bogus as $3 bills. So I will say, because of what happened here back, like during the Great Leap Forward, when when townships and prefectures and provinces, felt pressured to send in bogus, crop production numbers, and during a time when there was a drought, and a lot of people died as a result of that. When Deng Xiaoping came into power after Mao's death, when he came into power in 1978, there was a real push to say, good or bad, we're gonna publish, accurate numbers. Now, are they 100% accurate? I mean, they may, fudge a little bit. I don't know, but nothing like, the total, fantasy numbers that the U.S. government's putting out these days.
Yeah, the government numbers are complete bogus, as you said, starting with the inflation, unemployment numbers, the consumer index, and also the GDP. Also
even the GDP.
Well.
Yeah, they're saying that that the Chinese may fudge the GDP, 0.1% or so, but nothing like in the United States. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, they may not even be doing that, because I mean, even if it, in fact, they're even predicting, that the inflation, the GDP is going to drop below 7% this year, and they may fudge it down 0.1% and say it's 6.9 just to prove it. I mean, I'm just joking, but I mean, they may fudge it, a little bit, but I mean, a tiny bit, but I mean, nothing like the the fiction that Westerners. I don't know about Europe, but we know the United States is just completely a farce.
Right. So, how big is the pollution problem in China? Is it getting worse, or they're improving it?
Oh no, it's getting much better. When we were here in the 1990s, we lived in Beijing, and the first 2 or 3 years we lived on the 28th floor of a tower, and we were down in the central business district. We got here right after Tiananmen Square, and the place was deserted, and Beijing was a ghost town, and that didn't last long. And but there were factories everywhere, and you could see these chimneys all over Beijing, with plumes of day-glow green and red and yellow and blue, all it's just unbelievable, black and gray, and you could almost pick out the product they were making by the color of the stuff being belched out of the factories. Well, all of that, and we used to just be sick all the time. We didn't have the PM 2.5 index like we do now. It was so bad. There were almost no cars. There was only about 25 to 50,000 vehicles in all of Beijing, and there was just seas of bicycles and some motorbikes. And now it's changed after the Olympics. all those factories got moved out of Beijing. There's still too much coal being burned in the winter for heat in some of the older neighborhoods, but like we have gas heat in our new apartment complex, and they have brought in natural gas into much of the city. But the counter is that since 1997 they've gone from 50,000 vehicles to almost 6 million. So what's happened is we replaced factory pollution with car exhaust, and but like as I point out to people, it is so much better than it used to be. I mean, if we had a clear sky back in the 90s, it was like a Stonehenge celebration, a religious celebration, dance around the Stonehenge. We would be so happy to be able to see a blue sky and the sun and the moon. And now we have many days like that, and the pollution days are much fewer and far between. Of course, what are the days that the West talks about? What's the pollution days? They don't talk about all the days now that we actually have good air. But now the citizens are not only complaining about that, which they're working on, but water pollution is a huge problem. It's in the local press. It's a 50% of the groundwater in China is polluted. The topsoil is polluted from all these factories, that belched smoke for 50 years all over the place. All that residue, landed on the farmland, and so it's not just the air. They're also complaining a lot about water, and the progress has been absolutely transformative, but the economy has also quadrupled or quintupled, and so there still is a problem, and it is getting better.
Well, Jeff, thank you for your time to do a podcast with us. If people want to find out more about what you do, where can you go?
Yes.
Where can they go?
Yes, Mo, go to www.44, the two numbers 44days.net. And I'm also very pleased to announce that just this month I have been commissioned by two very well-respected alternative press websites, the Saker and the Greenville Post. And I've been commissioned to write a monthly article for each one of them about China. And if you go to, and I've also established a SoundCloud, a podcast for SoundCloud, and so I've got lots and lots of podcasts on there about China. Just put in 44 days, or you can find it on my website, and a lot of people are listening to the podcasts. And so if you're interested in China and you want to find out, what's really going on, I'm not trying to brag, but I just know how bad the bias is in the West. And there's some good stuff out there, but it's just about 90%, over the top, anti-Chinese and anti-communist party. And so if you want some really good, solid information about what's going on over here, check out www.44days.net.
Now, Jeff, I didn't get a chance to ask you about your background. Why did you decide to move to China?
In 1978, I went to Brazil to seek my fortune. I was going to become a soybean and corn baron, and because I grew up on a farm in Oklahoma, and but no one would loan me the money. Which is probably a good thing, because I'd probably be, killing locals right now and burning, chopping down forests to grow corn, and that's not who I want to be these days. But it gave me a taste of, international work, and so I joined the Peace Corps, and I became in North Africa, and that got my eye. But in 1980, I essentially left the United States, and from there, I was all over Africa and the Middle East, and then I met my wife, and we got married when I was in Algeria. And after about 10 years in the Arab world, we were just, I was kind of tired of I could read, speak, and write Arabic and fluently, and I'd kind of done everything I could, culturally, and it was time to move on. And so I was in the grain trade business, and I told my boss, I said, the first opening there is anywhere in the world, Florence and I will go. It's my wife. And Beijing popped up, and we slept on it for 24 hours, and said we're going to go to China. So that was in 1990, and then we were there for from 90 to 97, and then we went to France and owned an American retail store franchise for 5 years, and we went back to the United States for 9 years. Right when George W. Bush got elected, no, it was right around 9/11, and unfortunately we lost everything in the 2008 middle class implosion, and had to declare bankruptcy because we were in the real estate business, and so we decided to go back overseas, and in the interim we got certified as public school teachers, or state certified teachers, and so we started teaching in 2008 when we knew we were going to lose everything. And in 2010, we decided to come back over here and see how much it had changed. And our jaws have dropped and our eyes have been bugging out since we got off the airplane here. And it's a country that just continues to amaze me, and the transformations and how much the people have evolved along with the incredible economic growth. There's been a tremendous social evolution. So I feel like I'm just, watching history over here, and I know Obama and Congress and Wall Street and the American banks don't want to admit it, but the center of gravity for political and economic issues in the world is definitely tilting towards Beijing, and I think it's one of the most exciting cities in the world to be in right now.
Well, that's a very interesting story. You've been all over the place.
Yeah, I've traveled to almost 90 countries.
Oh, wow, that's great. Well, Jeff, thank you for your time, and hopefully you can come back on again. We didn't get a chance to talk about our other topics, but I'll save them for next time.
Absolutely, and looking forward to hearing the program on your YouTube station, and helping you let people know, let all my fans know that we did this together, so they can listen to it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, say hello to